The promise he made when he had nothing sun was just beginning to rise in the sky over Chennai, casting a golden warmth across the quiet neighborhood. It was the kind of morning that carried both silence and memory in a modest two-room apartment. Tucked away behind rows of crowded buildings, a young boy with big eyes and an even bigger heart sat beside a cracked window, staring out at the world that seemed far too big for someone like him. His name was Sundar. Back then, Sundar didn't dream of Silicon Valley or high towers or boardrooms filled with important people. No, he dreamed of something far simpler. He dreamed of not having to wait for hours before making a phone call because there was only one landline in the building. He dreamed of owning his own pair of shoes that weren't passed down 3 times. But most of all, he dreamed of giving his mother the life she never asked for, but always deserved. His mother, Lakshmi, was a woman of few words and endless strength. Every morning, she woke up before the birds, prepared tea without ever waking anyone, and tiptoed across the cool cement floor to get started with her chores. She never complained, not even when the ceiling leaked during monsoon, not even when there wasn't enough money to fix it. Sundar remembered watching her one night as rain dripped into a metal bucket beside the bed. She just placed a second bucket and kept reading her prayer book. Her peace didn't come from comfort, it came from acceptance. Sundar hated that kind of peace. He once asked her, "Ma, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?" Lakshmi smiled, her fingers still kneading dough. "Somewhere with a little garden and sunlight in the kitchen," she said. "A place where I can hear birds, not traffic." She never spoke of marble floors or chandeliers. Her dreams were always wrapped in warmth, not luxury. That day, Sundar looked at her and silently made himself a promise one day. He would buy her that house doubt that making a promise is easy when you're a child. Keeping it through pain and failure is another story. Years passed. Sundar grew, tall, quiet, and curious. He had a way of seeing things others didn't. While other boys talked about cricket and movies, Sundar asked questions no one had answers to. How does the electricity know where to go? Why do keys only open certain locks? Why does heat come through the metal faster than through plastic? His teachers noticed, but so did the world. And the world doesn't always like those who think differently. In school, he was mocked for his clothes, for his silence, for his accent when he tried to speak in English. One teacher even said, "You're too soft to go anywhere in life." Sundar didn't argue. He just lowered his head, held back the tears, and worked harder. His mind became his only escape, his only weapon. One day, when he was 16, he came home to find his father sitting on the steps outside, his head buried in his hands. It was rare to see his father like that. He was a proud man, an electrical engineer who'd always managed to stretch a rupee farther than most could imagine. But that evening, the world had been cruel. He'd been let go from his job without notice. "There's no work left for me," his father said quietly. "I'm too old for the new systems, too slow." Sundar stood there frozen, watching a man he thought was unbreakable begin to unravel. But what broke him more was the sound of his mother inside, humming a prayer, pretending she hadn't heard a word of it. It was in that moment Sundar knew the weight he would carry had just become heavier. He got a scholarship to study at the Indian Institute of Technology. The day he left, his mother packed his bag with care, slipping in an old photograph of their family. She placed her hands on his head and whispered, "Don't be afraid of big places, Sundar. Just remember who you are." But the world outside didn't welcome him with open arms. In college, he was a small fish in an ocean of brilliance. He had nothing, no fancy clothes, no connections, no polished English. His classmates drove scooters and wore watches with glowing dials. Sundar walked to class with a second-hand bag and shoes that pinched his feet. Every evening, he would sit alone under a neem tree near the library, reading old textbooks and scribbling ideas in a worn-out notebook. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was trying to build a bridge back to his promise. He stayed up nights, learning, failing, learning again. He didn't party. He didn't complain. He carried within him a quiet fire. And though the world couldn't see it yet, that Fire was growing. Years later, an opportunity came. A fellowship to study in the United States. He didn't know anyone there. He didn't even own a suitcase. His father had to take out a loan just to afford the plane ticket. When Sundar arrived in California, he felt smaller than ever. He didn't understand the cold, the food, the silence in strangers' eyes. He missed the sound of his mother stirring tea in the morning. He missed home. But he didn't stop. He worked odd jobs, washed dishes, graded papers, and every month, without fail, he sent money home, even if it meant skipping meals, even if it meant wearing the same clothes for weeks. One winter night, while walking back from the university lab, his hands stuffed in his thin jacket, Sundar slipped on the icy sidewalk and hit the ground hard. He lay there for a moment, staring up at the sky. No stars, just the cold. For the first time in years, he felt like giving up. Then his phone buzzed. It was a message from his mother. Are you eating well? Remember, what matters is not what you have, but what you give. He sat up slowly, brushed off the snow, and stood. He wasn't done yet. But what Sundar didn't know then was that someone had been watching his work. Someone who would soon change the course of his life. And just when he thought he was still years away from fulfilling that childhood promise, life was about to take a turn so unexpected. It would leave even him speechless. Asterisk the moment that changed everything the wind had picked up that evening. In California, it rushed between buildings and trees like it was searching for something it had lost long ago. Sundar walked quickly, holding his old backpack close to his chest, the zipper barely holding together. His fingers were numb, and his thoughts were scattered. His classes were draining him. Money was tighter than ever, and every night he wondered if his dream was just too far away to touch. He had been living in a small, shared apartment with 3 other students, none of whom really spoke to each other, beyond polite nods. The heater barely worked. The mattress on the floor was thin. Every creak in the building at night sounded like a warning from the universe. Go back. This isn't your place. But Sundar didn't listen. He spent his days in the computer lab, hunched over old machines, staring into screens that flickered and buzzed, while others were working on polished group projects and business presentations. Sundar was diving deep into code, into design, into what made systems talk to each other. He wasn't just learning technology, he was learning how to think like it, how to fix what was broken, how to build what didn't yet exist. One night, he was reading an article on emerging web tools when a professor happened to walk past. The professor paused, leaned over Sundar's shoulder, and asked quietly, "Do you really understand all of that?" Sundar looked up, unsure how to answer. "I'm trying to," he said. The professor asked him to explain a part of the article. Sundar did. Slowly, carefully, in his soft voice. The professor listened and nodded once. "I'm heading a project," he said. "We're building a team. I want you in it." That one moment, so small, so quiet, opened the first real door. For the first time since arriving in America, Sundar felt seen. The project was hard. Most of the team members were more experienced, louder, more confident. Sundar often sat at the edge of the room, speaking only when he was sure of his thoughts. But when he spoke, people listened. There was something about the way he explained ideas. So simple, so clear. He didn't try to impress. He tried to solve. Within weeks, the team lead began relying on Sundar for more than just research. He asked for feedback, for design input, for real decisions. And Sundar delivered, always quiet, always precise. It was the first time he saw what his future might look like, not as a blurry dream, but as a real shape forming in front of him. As the project wrapped up, months later, Sundar received an email that stunned him. It was an invitation to interview at a small but growing tech company, a company that would soon change the internet forever. Google. Sundar had heard the name. Everyone had. It was fast becoming the heartbeat of the digital world. The idea of working there felt impossible. But he remembered his mother's words again. Don't be afraid of big places. He took the train to Mountain View wearing his only decent shirt and a borrowed tie. His hands shook as he waited in the lobby, surrounded by people who seemed to belong more than he ever could. The interview was intense. 6 hours long, one room after another. Questions about algorithms, systems, user design, future ideas. Sundar didn't have dazzling answers. He had real ones. Thoughtful ones. Honest ones. When one interviewer asked him, "What would you change about Google?" Sundar paused, looked at the search bar, and said, "I would make it smarter. More helpful. Not just something people use, but something people trust." Asterisk, the room went silent. A week later, Sundar got the call. He got the job. Asterisk. He couldn't believe it. He read the email 3 times before it sank in. And then, without thinking, he dropped to his knees and whispered a thank you into the empty room. Not to anyone in particular. Just to life. To the universe, to every cracked wall and cold night that had brought him here. The next day, he called home, got his mother answered, her voice gentle and curious. "Ma," he said, trying to sound calm. "I got a job." At Google, there was a pause. "Is that good?" she asked, not knowing much about the company. Sundar laughed for the first time in weeks. "Yes, Ma, it's very good." And then her voice broke. "Will you be okay now?" He closed his eyes. "Yes, and one day you will be too." His job at Google started like all beginnings, due uncertain and quiet. He wasn't put in a fancy office. He wasn't given special treatment. He was just another engineer among hundreds. But Sundar didn't mind. He wasn't there for status. He was there to learn, to grow, and to give back. He arrived early, stayed late, asked questions, listened more than he spoke. While others chased visibility, Sundar chased value. Months into the job, a new product was being discussed behind closed doors, something called the Google Toolbar. It would allow people to search directly from their browsers without opening a homepage. Most of the team didn't see much value in it, but Sundar did. He spoke up in a meeting. "If we make it easier for people to access Google," he said, "they'll stay with us. It's not just about a search bar, it's about loyalty." Again, the room went quiet. They let him lead the project. The toolbar became a quiet success, then a loud one. Suddenly, Google was not just a website. It was everywhere, and Sundar was no longer invisible. Executives began to notice him. His calm clarity, his ability to take complex ideas and turn them into elegant, useful products. He didn't chase promotions, but he didn't demand respect, but it followed him. Years passed. He worked on Chrome, Android, Gmail tools that millions would one day rely on daily. And slowly, step by step, he climbed through the ranks. Never loud, never arrogant, just steady, humble, and sharp. But through all of it, he never forgot. He never forgot the 2-room apartment, the cracked ceiling, the evening he watched his father lose hope, the way his mother always smiled. Even when there was no reason to, he still remembered the promise. And one day, with quiet excitement in his chest and tears threatening to rise, Sundar made the call. He told his mother to pack a small bag. "Where are we going?" she asked, confused. "Somewhere with a garden," he said, "and sunlight in the kitchen." He had bought her a house, not a palace. Not something loud or showy, but something warm, peaceful, and filled with light. It had a garden where birds sang in the morning. It had a kitchen where sunlight danced across the walls. It had peace, the kind his mother never asked for, but always deserved. But what happened when she stepped inside that house for the first time, what she did next, would leave everyone, even Sundar, speechless. Asterisk, what she did when she stepped. Inside car ride was silent, except for the gentle rhythm of tires on the road. Sundar sat beside his mother in the back seat, his hands resting in his lap, fingers lightly twitching as if they were trying to keep his heart from overflowing. The air smelled of earth and jasmine, a scent that always reminded him of early mornings in Chennai, before the world woke up. Before the noise drowned out the peace. His mother, Lakshmi, wore her simplest cotton sari, pale blue with a white border. The same one she wore during festivals and special prayer days. Sundar had offered to buy her something new, something elegant. She had refused. "This is enough," she had said. "I am not going to a wedding. I am going to see what my son wants to show me." The car turned off the main road and onto a Quiet street lined with small trees and homes spaced far enough apart to let the wind breathe. Sundar's heart beat faster. The house was just around the bend, a small sun-colored home with a red-tiled roof and white railings. The front gate was painted soft green, just like the shutters his mother had once pointed to years ago while they walked past an old colonial bungalow. See that? She had said, "Those shutters remind me of calm. If I ever had a house, I'd want windows like that." He remembered. And now it stood there, real. When the car stopped in front of the gate, Sundar stepped out first. He walked to the other side, opened the door, and held out his hand. His mother stepped out slowly, her eyes scanning the quiet neighborhood. "The trees, the gate, the house. Whose house is this?" she asked, her voice unsure, cautious. Sundar didn't answer. He just smiled and gestured toward the gate. "Go inside, Ma." Her brows furrowed. She hesitated. And then, slowly, she pushed open the gate. It creaked slightly, just enough to feel real. She walked up the stone path toward the porch, her steps light but hesitant. Like someone walking through a dream they didn't trust, yet at the door, Sundar reached into his pocket and handed her a small silver key. "You open it," he said. Her hands trembled slightly as she took the key. For a moment, she just stood there, holding it, staring at the lock as if it were a riddle. Then she leaned forward, slid the key in, and turned. The door clicked open. The smell of new wood and fresh paint greeted them first. The hallway was bathed in golden light, filtering through a large east-facing window. The floor was smooth, cool tile, simple but warm. To the left, a small prayer room with a carved wooden door. To the right, the kitchen, her kitchen, and there it was. Sunlight pouring in through the window, landing perfectly on a long wooden counter. Tiny potted plants lined the sill, basil, mint, and a small jasmine sprout. The shelves were open and wide, everything within reach. No leaks, no cracks, no dark corners. She stood at the threshold, unmoving. "Go in, Ma," Sundar said gently. "This is yours." She turned to him then. In her eyes, lips pressed tightly, trying not to tremble. "You bought this?" "For me? Yes." "Why?" He didn't know how to answer that. Because he remembered? Because he made a promise as a boy? Because every line on her face, every quiet sacrifice, every day she smiled through pain, he had carried all of that. With him, he simply said, "Because you deserve it." And then she did something Sundar didn't expect. She turned around, walked into the center of the kitchen, looked up at the ceiling, and suddenly dropped to her knees. She placed both palms on the floor, and with her forehead touching the ground, she whispered a prayer. It was not a prayer of thanks for the house. It was a prayer for her son. She stayed like that for a long time. The sunlight warming her back, tears falling silently onto the floor. When she stood up, she walked back to him, cupped his face with her small, soft hands, and said, "I never needed this, Sundar. But you made me feel seen." Sundar couldn't speak. He remembered all the times he had tried to make her proud. And now, here she was, proud of him, not for the house, not for the money, not for the title, but for the heart that remembered hers. They walked through the house slowly. The garden was small, but full of promise. A young mango tree stood in the corner, already flowering. The walls of the bedroom were painted pale yellow, the color of early dawn. The living room had a soft brown couch and a bookshelf already filled with her favorite Tamil novels and prayer. Books. But the most special thing was the surprise Sundar had saved for last. In a small study at the back of the house. He had framed 3 items and hung them on the wall. His childhood notebook filled with sketches of homes, a copy of The Job, offer from Google, and in the center, a photo of his mother smiling on the day he left for college. Wearing the same blue sari, she stood in front of those frames, her fingers touching the glass. "You kept all this?" "Everything. Even when you were busy. With the world?" "Especially then." For the first time, Sundar saw his mother as more than just the woman who raised him. He saw her as the reason he became who he was. Her resilience had shaped his. Her silence had taught him strength. Her humility had become his compass. Asterisk, but even in this moment of joy, he noticed something else in her eyes. A shadow. Not of sadness, but of weight. What is it, Ma? She hesitated, then she said quietly, You gave me everything. Now, let me give you something. You don't have to, but she held up a hand. You built this for me, but who's building peace for you? He didn't know how to answer that. His success had brought him far. To boardrooms and stages, to wealth and recognition. But somewhere in that climb, he had forgotten how to rest, how to sit still, how to just be Sundar, not CEO, not innovator, not builder of worlds. His mother saw that. You've kept a promise to me, Sundar, she said. But now it's time you keep a promise to yourself. That night, Sundar sat alone in the garden, listening to the crickets. The house was still. His mother had gone to sleep, finally at peace. But his heart was stirring. Her words echoed in, What promise had he made to himself? And why did it feel like he had forgotten it somewhere along the way? A phone buzzed in his pocket. Asterisk, it was a message from work. Another project. Another request. Another problem to solve. But this time, Sundar didn't reply. He looked up at the stars, at the quiet house glowing softly behind him. Maybe it was time to go back. Not just to Chennai, but to the boy he used to be, the one who dreamed not of power, or titles, but of kindness, of meaning, of something deeply human. And as he sat there in the dark, a thought slowly formed, one that would soon change not just his life again, but the lives of thousands. Asterisk. The promise he made to himself. Moon hung quietly over Chennai that night, casting a silver hue across the garden as Sundar sat in the darkness. The chirping of crickets filled the air, interrupted only by the distant echo of a dog barking. Somewhere in the alley. Inside the house, his mother slept peacefully, her breath slow and even. Her dreams were calm, now safe in the house. She never dared to imagine for herself. But Sundar's eyes were wide open. He stared at the ground, elbows resting on his knees, his thoughts swirling like smoke in his chest. Something had shifted. Inside him, something small, but powerful. It wasn't a breakdown. It wasn't a regret. It was something quieter, something deeper. It was reflection. He had achieved everything the world told him was success, power, influence, wealth, recognition. People looked at him with admiration, with expectation. But no one had asked what he wanted for himself in a very long time. Not even him, until his mother did. Her words had pierced straight through the polished surface. He wore in boardrooms and meetings. You've kept a promise to me, Sundar. But now it's time you keep a promise to yourself. What was that promise? He thought back to his childhood, the long walks to school. The days he sat under the neem tree alone, sketching ideas into his notebook. He hadn't been dreaming of power. He had been dreaming of impact, of making life simpler, better, kinder. He wanted to help people, especially the ones who no one noticed. And somewhere along the way, the noise had grown louder than that dream. The next morning, Sundar woke up before the sun, like he used to as a boy. He stepped out into the cool dawn air, barefoot, the grass damp under his feet. He didn't check his emails. He didn't look at the headlines. He just stood there, listening to the quiet. He had come home to give his mother peace. But she had given him something greater clarity. He realized he had been running at full speed for so long. He didn't know what stillness felt like anymore. When his mother came outside a little later, she found him sitting on the front steps, a soft smile on his face. Coffee? She asked, holding 2 cups. He took one, nodded. They sat there together, sipping slowly. Nothing grand, nothing loud. Just a mother and her son, sitting in the quiet. I've been thinking, he said. She looked at him, waiting. I want to help the children who are like me. The ones who are curious, but invisible. Who dream, but don't speak. Who have no voice because no one ever asked them to use it. His mother nodded, her fingers wrapped around the warm cup. Then you must begin, she said. And that was it. No. Long speeches. No elaborate plans. Just quiet encouragement. That day, Sundar called his team. He asked for a temporary leave, not for a break, but for a purpose. He didn't want press coverage. He didn't want attention. He just wanted time to build something new, something close to the ground. Over the next few weeks, Sundar traveled to small villages, rural schools, places where electricity was still unpredictable and internet access was almost non-existent. He didn't come with cameras or bodyguards. He came with questions. He sat on floors with school children, asked them what they wished their classrooms had. He listened to teachers who were working 3 jobs just to keep lights on. He walked through computer labs where the screens were cracked and keys were missing. And what struck him the most wasn't the poverty. It was the hunger to learn. Kids with eyes wide open, asking questions that reminded him of his younger self. Why? Doesn't the signal work here? How does the internet know where we are? Why can't we use Google like the city kids? One girl, maybe 9 years old, looked up at him and said, "I want to make an app that helps my Amma remember things. She forgets sometimes." Sundar felt something in his chest break open. He returned to Chennai a week later, exhausted but alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. He locked himself in the study and began sketching again, not for product, not for profit, but for purpose. He outlined a plan not just for improving access, but for reshaping opportunity. He envisioned a learning program, fully offline, powered by a device so simple it could be run on solar energy. Lessons would be available in every regional language. It would include voice learning for those who couldn't read yet. He wanted to empower kids to dream, not with permission, but with tools. When he finally pitched the idea to a small group of engineers and educators, they were stunned. "This is not Google scale," one of them said gently. "This is grassroots." "It won't be big enough," Sundar smiled. "It will be deep enough." And that was the promise he made to himself, not to always go higher, but to also go deeper. As months passed, the project, quietly named Deep Roots, began to take shape. No headlines, no media buzz. But slowly, village by village, children began receiving these devices. And with them, hope. Stories began to emerge. A boy in Andhra Pradesh who built a small solar fan for his home after watching a science module. A girl in Bihar who translated lessons for her grandmother so they could learn together. A teacher in Tamil Nadu who used the system to teach 50 students under a banyan tree. And all the while, Sundar kept returning. Not as a guest, not as a speaker, but as a listener. Every time he walked into a classroom, someone would ask, "Are you the man from America?" And he would always reply the same way, "No, I'm just Sundar from Chennai." But then something happened. Something he hadn't expected. A news article leaked details about the program. It was meant to be a simple feature in a local magazine, but within days, the story spread. People around the world began to take notice, not just of Sundar's role at Google, but of what he was doing quietly in the background. Emails poured in. Donors, volunteers, organizations, all wanting to support Deep Roots. Sundar found himself in the spotlight again, but this time it felt different. It wasn't about him. It was about the mission. Still, the attention brought complications. Google executives wanted to explore ways to merge the project into larger global initiatives. Others pushed for expansion, monetization, visibility. But Sundar hesitated. This was something he had built not as a CEO, but as a son. A student, a silent child who remembered what it meant to be overlooked. One night, back in his mother's house, he sat with her in the kitchen, telling her everything. The offers, the pressure, the fear that the project might be taken out of his hands. She listened without interrupting, just as she always had. When he finished, she poured him another cup of tea, placed it in front of him and said, "Then protect it, not as a leader, but as a father protects a child." And in that moment, Sundar knew what he had to do. But what he didn't know yet was that someone from his past, someone he had almost forgotten, was about to return into his life and test everything he had built. The boy from the alley it started with a letter. An envelope with smudged ink and uneven handwriting arrived at Sundar's Chennai home one rainy afternoon. It was placed on the table beside the window, its paper damp around the edges. There was no sender name, no logo, just his full name written in a hand. That seemed both unfamiliar and hauntingly close. Sundar almost left it unopened, but something made him pause. He picked it up, peeled it open carefully, and began to read. Dear Sundar, you probably don't remember me. Most people didn't. I was the boy who sat behind you in class 3. My name is Mahesh. We lived in the same building, in the back alley flat where the drain always overflowed. I had one shirt, no books, and a father who only came home to shout. You once gave me your pencil when mine broke. You didn't say anything. You just placed it on my desk and kept writing. That was the first time anyone treated me like I was worth something. I never forgot that. I heard about what you're doing now, with Deep Roots. I wanted to say thank you, not just for what you're building, but for remembering kids like me. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know you made a difference long before you had a title. Mahesh. Sundar sat frozen for a long time after reading those words. The rain outside tapped gently on the glass, the soft sound, almost matching the ache rising in his chest. Mahesh, he remembered now. Small boy, shy eyes. Shoes too big, hair always uncombed. He used to sit in the back, quiet as a shadow. Sundar had never known his full story, only that he was often alone and always seemed hungry. How many Maheshes had he passed by in his life? How many had gone unnoticed? He turned the letter over. No return address. No way to reply. He wanted to find him, not because Mahesh had asked for anything, but because something in the letter had stirred a truth inside Sundar that he couldn't ignore anymore. Dahi reached out to old classmates, former teachers. Some had vague memories. Others remembered the name but not the face. Weeks passed with no luck. And then one morning he got a call. A social worker in Chennai had found a man named Mahesh working in a small repair shop outside the city. He fixed old radios, cleaned fans, and sometimes repaired mobile phones with tools barely holding together. Sundar didn't wait. He took the car that evening, drove through the crowded streets until the city turned. The dust roads and the buildings thinned. The shop was nothing more than a shack with a tin roof, the sign hanging crooked above the door. Inside, a single bulb buzzed weakly, and the sound of a screwdriver turning echoed out onto the street. Sundar stepped inside. Mahesh didn't look up at first. He was hunched over a broken cassette player, lips pursed in focus. Can I help you? He asked without turning. Maybe, Sundar said softly. Mahesh turned. His face was older now, lined with time, sunburned, rough. But the eyes, those were the same. He stared at Sundar for a long second. Then two. No, he whispered. It can't be. Sundar smiled gently. It's me. Mahesh didn't speak. He stood there, still as stone, then slowly sank into the old wooden stool behind him. His hand shook slightly, his lips parted but silent. Why are you here? He finally asked. I got your letter. Mahesh looked down, embarrassed. I didn't think it would reach you. It did. They sat in silence for a while. The sound of rain on the tin roof above them, steady and soft. You remembered me? Mahesh asked, not quite believing it. I remember the boy who always sat in the corner. I remember that you never asked for help. I remember you tried to fix your notebook when it ripped, with thread from your mother's sorry. Mahesh laughed softly. She wasn't happy about that. You mattered, even when no one said it. The words landed heavily in the room. Mahesh's eyes glistened, but he blinked them away. I work here now, he said, motioning to the tiny shop. Not much, but honest work. I teach a few kids too. How to open a speaker, clean a motor. Not official, but they learn. Sundar leaned forward. How many kids? Sometimes 2, sometimes 10. Whoever shows up. They come because they don't have anywhere else to go after school, or no school at all. It paused. Then Sundar asked, would you let me help? Mahesh frowned. I didn't write that letter for help. I know, that's why I want to. Mahesh looked at him, trying to read between the lines. What kind of help? What if Deep Roots started here? Sundar said, What if this shop became something more? A learning space. A repair space? A place where kids not only learn how to fix machines, but how to fix the world. Mahesh shook his head. This is just a shack, Sundar. So was the house I grew up in. And there it was Dada sparked out within 2 months. The repair shop was transformed not into a modern building with air conditioning and glass walls, but into a learning den. Shelves were added. Stools, a second bulb. Mahesh continued teaching repairs. But now the kids had access to Deep Roots tablets. Solar-powered, voice-guided, filled with lessons in Tamil, Hindi, English. Kids came barefoot. In torn shirts, but they came with curiosity. And Sundar kept returning. Not in a suit, not with a camera crew. Just as Sundar. Sitting on the floor beside the children, asking them what they wanted to build. One boy wanted to create a water filter. For his mother. One girl dreamed of designing shoes that could last 5 years. Every question reminded Sundar why he had started this in the first place. But as the program grew, so did the eyes watching it. Investors. Policymakers. Tech executives. Some saw opportunity. Others saw a threat. And one in particular, former colleague, turned competitor, saw Sundar's quiet project as a challenge to his own ambitions. What Sundar didn't know yet was that this man had plans to take Deep Roots away from the ground and place it in a world of profit, branding, and control. And soon, Sundar would be forced to make a choice, one that could cost him everything he had built, or risk the soul of the very mission that had brought him back home. Asterisk, the final promise that sky over Chennai was a deep amber that evening, the sun slipping behind clouds thick with rain. The streets buzzed with life, yet inside the walls of Sundar's quiet home, a storm far more personal was beginning to stir. Sundar sat at the dining table. A printout of an internal proposal spread before him. At first glance, it looked like progress charts, expansion timelines, partnership offers from multinational corporations. It detailed how Deep Roots could be scaled rapidly, how branding could increase user trust, how monetization could support global outreach. It was written in clean language, precise numbers, appealing visions, but made Sundar's chest tighten, because between those lines he saw what was being taken away. The handwritten signs on mud walls, the dusty hands of children scrolling through lessons while sitting barefoot, the quiet pride in Mahesh's voice when he taught a child how to repair a broken fan. He saw all of that disappearing into something shinier, louder, and colder. The proposal had come from Arjun. They had once worked side by side in Google's early days, building tools that shaped the internet. Arjun was brilliant, bold, and relentless. But over time, ambition had hardened into something else. To him, success wasn't just about creating, it was about controlling. Arjun had recently launched a competing initiative in education. Slick branding, aggressive investors, strategic press, and now he wanted to absorb Deep Roots into it, offering funding in exchange for ownership. He framed it as amplifying impact. But Sundar could see the truth. Arjun didn't care about the children. He cared about the attention. The next morning, they met in a glass-walled cafe in Mumbai. Sundar arrived quietly, in a simple shirt and worn shoes. Arjun leaned back in his chair, designer watch catching the sunlight. "You're too attached to the poetry of this," Arjun said, tapping the table. "We can take it global. Make it 10 times bigger, faster, cleaner. I'm offering you the structure to make it unstoppable." Sundar took a breath. But at what cost? Arjun didn't flinch. Everything needs structure. Branding, speed. The grassroots model is beautiful, sure, but it's small. It doesn't scale. Sundar stared at his old colleague. "You want to scale the tree, but you're tearing out the roots." "People don't care about roots," Arjun said with a shrug. "They care about fruit." Sundar stood slowly. "Maybe. But I made a promise, not just to my mother, not just to myself, but to the boy I used to be, and to every child who's still sitting in the back row with a broken pencil, waiting for someone to notice." He left without another word. That evening, Sundar returned to his mother's house. He walked into the kitchen, where she was lighting a small diya. The scent of sandalwood filled the air. "You look tired," she said, without turning. "I am." She placed the diya on the windowsill, then turned to him. "Did you speak your truth?" "I did." "Then rest." But he couldn't rest yet. He called a meeting with the entire Deep Roots team. Not in a hotel or conference hall, but in the garden behind his mother's home. Simple mats were laid on the ground. Children played nearby. Laughing under the mango tree, Sundar stood in front of them, holding nothing but a small notepad. "We've been offered a chance to grow," he said. "But not on our terms. They want control. They want to own what we've built." The room was quiet, so I need to ask you all, what are we building? Is it a product? Or is it a promise? A woman raised her hand. She was a teacher from a school where students shared one textbook between 5. Her voice trembled. "It's a promise. Because no one ever came to our village. Before this, and now children stay after class. They stay because they believe they matter." Sundar nodded. Another hand rose. A boy, maybe 16, who had learned coding through Deep Roots and now volunteered to teach others. "This isn't something that needs to be bought," he said. "It needs to be protected." And one by one, voices joined. Some in English, some in Tamil, some in quiet nods. But they all said the same thing. "We must protect the roots." So Sundar made his choice. He rejected the offer. He gave up a chance to turn Deep Roots into a tech empire. And instead, he turned it into a movement. He formed a trust. Not under his name, but in honor of his parents, his teachers, and the countless unnamed mentors who had shaped him. Deep Roots became open source, community-led, and protected by those who lived with it. It would be free, always. And its purpose would remain pure. The press didn't understand it. Some called him foolish, others idealistic. But Sundar didn't care, because every time he stepped into a classroom, every time a child raised their hand and asked why, he knew he had chosen the right path. Months later, he sat again in his mother's kitchen. She was cooking idly, humming quietly. "Are you happy now?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "I'm not just happy," he said. "I'm whole." She smiled. "Then keep walking." He looked out the window. The garden was full of life. A child ran past with a tablet in one hand and a flower in the other. Laughter echoed across the walls. Not loud, not flashy. Just honest. Just real. And in that moment, Sundar realized the house he had built for his mother wasn't just bricks and light. It was a symbol of every promise fulfilled, of every silent child finally being heard. And it was just the beginning. Asterisk.